would like to talk to you about drugs. And I know, I already sound like a middle school health teacher about to show you a video like this.
The pattern is generally the same. Take a lack of responsibility, the inability to make right choices, add to it ignorance and indifference, and top it off with a desire for escapism and kicks. The sum total is then conceivably found in the bennies, the reefer, the pot needle.
Yes, the pot needle. Now, you may laugh, but that film works. Think about it. When was the last time that you saw a pot needle? Exactly. But unfortunately, America is now in the midst of a new drug crisis, and it seems that no one is safe from it.
Laura, Charlie's owner, who asked us not to use her last name, says Charlie had to be rushed to the vet. You can't see the suspect throw the drugs over the fence in the video, but that's Charlie. And what she's eating is a full bag of heroin.
You can't process the fact that your dog ate heroin.
Yeah, and if she can't process it, imagine how it must have felt for her dog when it kicked in. Who's a good boy? I'm a good boy. I'm a really good boy. I'm the best boy. But here's the thing. Even that light-hearted local news story had some chilling context.
Garrett Bishop runs the Bark and Play where it happened. He says it highlights a much bigger problem.
This whole heroin problem around here is ridiculous. You know, we find needles, we find everything around here, and it's getting to the point to where I can't let my employees go outside.
Okay, that is terrifying. Although, honestly, rampant heroin abuse near a doggy daycare centre is the first case that McGruff, the crime dog, is actually qualified to solve. But the thing is, that is symptomatic of the fact that America is facing an epidemic of addiction to opioids, like heroin and prescription painkillers. As of 2015, an estimated 2.6 million Americans were addicted to them, and they're now involved in almost 30,000 overdose deaths a year in the US. And the prevalence of this problem astonishes some people. Just listen to Donald Trump up in New Hampshire.
They said the biggest single problem they have up here is heroin. And I said, how does heroin work with these beautiful lakes and trees and all of the beautiful... It doesn't.
Yeah, it does, though. It does. Heroin works basically everywhere because it's heroin. It's not a cell phone. Heroin has full coverage. So tonight, we're going to look at one of the major causes of this crisis, prescription painkillers, which are chemical cousins of heroin. Around 75% of heroin users started with a prescription opioid, drugs like OxyContin, Vicodin, and Percocet, which some take recreationally and others take as prescribed by a doctor. But however it starts, it can get out of hand fast.
So how many, if we start from this side, have moved from prescription drugs to heroin? Everybody.
And heroin's so much more cheaper.
Once people became dependent on painkillers, they said they'd do almost anything to get them.
One time I was hurting so bad that I ended up punching a 4x4 and breaking all 3 of these fingers and this bone to get pain meds from my doctor. I did that several times.
So you'd hurt yourself in order to go to a doctor?
I had 9 teeth pulled out of my head for prescriptions.
At the time, that's how
to get a prescription.
Yeah. I've been with like groups of people where they've taken like bats to their wrists,
broke arms
easily.
I mean, how many people do know someone that's died of overdose from? Everybody.
This is happening everywhere. The odds are right now you probably know someone who is struggling or who has died from an opioid addiction. Some towns have been devastated. Just 2 months ago, in and around Huntington, West Virginia, 28 overdoses occurred in one 5-hour span. And given their risks, it's kind of amazing how freely doctors have prescribed them, because there are a lot in circulation.
We have currently nearly 250 million prescriptions for opioids written every year. That's enough for every adult in America to have a bottle of pills and then some.
Holy shit! And those bottles aren't necessarily sitting on a shelf unused, like that bottle of wine that you are saving for a special occasion, that now serves as a reminder that you haven't had a single event in 4 years that was deserving of getting fancy drunk. No, these pills are getting used or falling into the hands of others, from those who are already addicted to just bored teenagers. So how has this happened? Because, interestingly, as recently as the early 90s, doctors were excessively wary of prescribing opioids.
Back then, there was a thing called opiophobia. A lot of healthcare professionals did not want to prescribe opiates at all because they thought you give the slightest amount, you turn your patients into addicts. And so even people with stage 4 cancer weren't being given opiates. They were left to suffer.
Yes, opiophobia, which is not to be confused with Oprah phobia, which is the irrational fear of screaming talk show hosts giving you a brand new Pontiac sedan. Oprah, I can't afford the taxes on this. You haven't thought it through. Now, obviously, that level of undertreating pain was a huge problem in itself. And to their credit, pain care advocates worked to dispel some dangerous myths. But in doing so, they made a key mistake, as you will see right at the end of this clip.
Today, the federal government said in a report that about half of all surgery patients suffer needlessly because doctors and hospitals don't pay enough attention to painkiller. Health Secretary Louis Sullivan talked about myths, that pain builds character. Myth, he said. That infants don't feel pain. Another myth. That elderly patients have a higher tolerance for pain, or that painkillers are addictive. All myths.
Okay. First, of course babies feel pain. How the f*** did we ever think otherwise? But more importantly, the fact that painkillers are addictive was not a myth. It's like a book of Greek mythology featuring the stories of Zeus, Sisyphus, Oedipus, and Yarni. Come on! That last one is very real and it cannot be dismissed. And look, a nuanced discussion between the medical community about the complexities of pain treatment is clearly important. The problem is, that discussion became dominated by the pharmaceutical industry, who started amplifying the message that opioids should not just be used for acute pain, like that from cancer or surgery, but for all sorts of pain, like arthritis and backaches, which makes sense as a motive coming from the pharma industry. End-of-life pain care is a narrow business. It's hard to make a lot of money off of a product exclusively marketed to people who are close to death. Honestly, I don't know how Fox News even does it. I have no idea. It's a mystery. Volume, I guess, but I don't know. And within the pharma industry, the loudest voice was Purdue. In 1996, they released the blockbuster drug OxyContin, and they marketed it to doctors aggressively, giving out swag like fishing hats, swing music CDs bearing the slogan, "Swing in the right direction with OxyContin," and Oxy-branded stuffed plush toys. And if you think we didn't get hold of one of those, you have clearly never watched this show before, because yes, here he is, and yes, he is my new best friend, and yes, his name is Harold. And I've got to say, Purdue, this is the perfect choice of mascots, because much like a gorilla, OxyContin might seem appealing, but if you're not careful, it will tear your f***ing life apart. Won't you, Harold? Yes, he will. Purdue also distributed inspirational videos like I Got My Life Back, featuring 7 patients whose lives were turned around by the magic of OxyContin.
Since I've been on this new pain medication, I have not missed one day of work, and my boss really appreciates that. Lauren is there every day, so I'm able to be very productive. And one of the things that's really dear to my heart, and which I'm especially excited about, is just the fact that I'm able to spend time with my grandchildren. It's amazing just to be able to keep up with them and not have to always constantly tell them, Grandma can't play now, Grandma can't do this, Grandma's hurting, Grandma's back hurts.
That's genuinely sweet, and it's also a powerful message. Although I will note, it makes time with your grandkids more fun could apply to literally any drug. Hey, kids, Grandpa's going to take you to the park. I'm going to take you on the swings. I'm going to push you real high, and then we're going to stay up all night, and I'm going to come up with inventions, and you're going to write them down, and you're going to write them down fast. We're having quality time! And it wasn't just uplifting stories. Other Purdue videos sought to reassure patients who might have been nervous about taking such a strong drug.
Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
Less than 1%. And I know it may seem like they are pulling that number out of their arse, but they actually pulled it out of the letters to the editor section of the New England Journal of Medicine. Seriously, this is it. That paragraph is the whole thing. It wasn't peer-reviewed, and it was only about short-term use of opioids in hospitals, but it became the main source for that 1% claim. And letters pages are not a solid source for information. Just this month, a Pennsylvania newspaper published a letter featuring a man's question about Hillary Clinton's fitness for office because, and I quote, "What if that time of the month comes?" To which the obvious answer is, one, she's 68. And two, f*** you, maybe, just a little bit. But even if doctors started noticing that a lot more than 1% of their patients were getting addicted, Purdue had a ready answer. What if they're not? Because they had doctors on their payroll like Alan Spanos, who were happy to explain the helpful new concept of pseudo-addiction. I'll let him tell you about it.
Pseudo-addiction is when a patient is looking like a drug addict because they're pursuing pain relief. So pseudo-addiction is relief-seeking behavior mistaken as drug addiction.
Wow, that is so convenient. That is like Chipotle going, have you heard of this fascinating new thing called pseudo-diarrhea? It looks a lot like diarrhea, but it's not diarrhea, and the cure may actually be more tacos. And Purdue's overall message of a quick, easy cure for pain was very appealing, especially for primary care doctors who might only have 15 minutes to treat a patient. So it is no wonder that by the year 2000, doctors were writing nearly 6 million OxyContin prescriptions per year, and its sales were more than even Viagra. And remember, that was a drug that had the distinct advantage of being sold by Bob Dole, the red-hot late 90s it boy. However, evidence started piling up that it was far riskier than promised, with headlines like OxyContin abuse is increasing and OxyContin abuse called a plague, or as I'm sure Purdue would call it, a pseudo-plague. And even the stars of Purdue's I Got My Life Back video were not immune from this trend, because a later investigation discovered 2 out of the 7 of them died as active opioid abusers, and that grandmother you saw earlier became addicted and nearly lost everything.
I lost my house. Oh yeah, I've lost cars, I lost a lot. A lot. I lost a lot to keep behind taking that drug when I did lose my job. Had I not lost my medical insurance, or as I said, if I was to go to the mailbox once a month and I would find a bottle of OxyContin in it, I'd probably still be on it and I'd probably be dead.
Think about that. Losing her health insurance might have saved her life. That is an irony so deep, it would vaporize Alanis Morissette into a cloud of fucking steam. Now, by now, I'm guessing you are pretty angry at Purdue. So you may be glad to hear that in 2007, they admitted some responsibility in a lawsuit so big it actually led the evening news.
Good evening. The maker of a hugely popular painkiller has some pain of its own tonight. The company and its top officers will pay $634 million in fines for lying to the public.
Wow. You know they f***ed up if they had to pay over $600 million for misleading marketing, because you get a lot of leeway on that. That's why Dunkin' Donuts has not yet been sued for saying America runs on Dunkin', when we all know their real slogan should be, sometimes you can't find a Starbucks. And look, it wasn't just Purdue pushing the envelope. Cephalon paid a $444 million settlement for over-marketing drugs, and Insys has been investigated for some of its practices surrounding a drug they made containing fentanyl, an opioid which can be 100 times more powerful than morphine. Their drug is only approved for cancer patients, but Insys is accused of not just pushing it for non-cancer patients, but even helping convince insurance companies to pay for it. And to do that, according to one ex-employee, they used a particularly shady technique.
If you don't have cancer and breakthrough cancer pain, no insurance company is going to pay for this medication. So if you call up and you tell them that the patient doesn't have cancer, it's automatically denied.
So instead, what were you doing?
They would always ask, does the patient have cancer? Uh-huh. That's what we would say.
So you do uh-huh, you'd say yes.
But I'm not saying yes, right? I would just say uh-huh.
Isn't that a yes?
Well, that's what they did think, but I wasn't blatantly saying yes.
Oh my God! Except everybody knows uh-huh means yes. If you go to thesaurus.com and type in uh-huh, literally the first word that comes up is yes, followed by options such as absolutely, definitely, unquestionably, and yep. And at this point, I should say that Purdue and Cephalon's owner told us that those practices were in the past, and Insys has denied wrongdoing and didn't respond to any of our questions, not even with a nuh-uh. But at a certain point, the question has to become less, what did we do wrong, and more, what do we do now? Because these drugs are still the most effective solution for certain types of pain, and many patients need them, so we can't get rid of them, but we have to be much more careful about how they're prescribed. And to their credit, the CDC issued voluntary guidelines this year suggesting doctors use non-opioid therapies when possible and, if and when one is needed, to start patients with a lower dose and a shorter supply, a technique that they call start low and go slow, which does sound good, but also sounds like how your creepiest high school friends described cunnilingus. Dude, start low, go slow. And afterwards, take her to friendlies. Chicks love root beer floats, dude. They love them, dude. Low and slow. Low and slow, dude. Low and slow. Look, and while all that sounds great, unfortunately, not all areas of the country have access to alternative pain treatments.
It's easy to say use some non-opioid alternative, but in a lot of rural areas, patients don't have access to things like physical therapy and mindfulness meditation, and insurance companies won't pay for it.
And that is a big problem, because even in a rural area, alternative pain treatments should be at least as easy to find as Waffle Houses, which, like heroin, are both hazardous to your health and dangerously addictive. And to put it mildly, it does not seem that the pharmaceutical industry is expecting any major reversals in opioid sales anytime soon. In fact, they are now marketing extra drugs to fight one of opioid side effects, constipation.
If you need an opioid to manage your chronic pain, you may be so constipated. It feels like everyone can go, except you.
You know painkillers are powerful if people use them despite the side effect being jealous of a dog's butthole. And that commercial aired during the Super Bowl this year, which means A, it is a big business, and B, I can only assume there was a reverse commercial during the Puppy Bowl featuring a jealous dog and a shitting man. But we cannot just work to prevent future addicts. We're going to need to do more to help the millions that already exist, which means more investment in treatment programs, as well as increasing the availability of drugs like naloxone, commonly used in a nasal spray to rescue people from overdoses. Because, as this firehouse makes clear, it is a tool that they use with depressing frequency.
So every single firefighter in the Revere Fire Department knows how to use this, has been trained on this.
Has used it. Yes.
And has used it.
Yes. From the chief down. We tend to have more overdoses than we do fires. So it's a piece of equipment that we can't go without now, just like we have the hose.
It's true. Firefighters might be more likely to use a nasal spray than a hose, which is really going to f*** up those hot firefighter calendars, because something about an overdose-reversing nasal spray isn't quite as sexy. It's still sexy, but just not quite as sexy. It is still sexy, though, just not quite, but still, and that's not the point. The point is, there is no one simple answer here. Not all opioid addicts will respond to the same treatment, and not all people in pain will find relief from alternative therapies. This is going to take a massive effort and a significant investment. It won't be cheap, it won't be quick, and it won't be easy. And it is hard not to be angry at the drug companies like Purdue, whose promise of cheap, quick, easy pain solutions help put us in this fucking mess. Because while they may not be solely responsible, if you were to ask me if they bear significant blame for reckless, greedy behaviour which contributed to this massive public health crisis, I might not say yes exactly, but I would definitely say, uh-huh.